Welcome to Sustainable Futures with Daniela on the first and the third Saturday every month at 10 a.m. Czech time. Join me for in-depth conversations, exclusive interviews and strategic insights with industry leaders, policymakers and innovators shaping our future. We'll explore how integrating social fairness enhances business and impacts sectors like fashion, food, tech, tourism, sports, and more towards a sustainable social change. Every organization gets stronger by challenging itself, so do we. I know it from my own life experience as a woman with a disability who understands the power of resilience, communication, and of thinking out of the box, and as a female executive leader at global level on social sustainability and inclusion. Be inspired, learn, and gain insights. Tune in, think different, and act with purpose. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, in whichever part of the world you are. Today we're going to talk with a gentleman who has 25 years in sport marketing. He led the Coca-Cola's strategy, notably boosting revenue by 372 million during the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. Now he is back in London after a decade in Brazil and Japan. He advises purpose-driven startups and lectures on sports business. Who is this gentleman? His name is James Williams. And I know that James also excels in digital integration, stakeholder management, and team engagement. So I'm really excited to have you here today, James.
Hi, Daniela. It's great to be here, and thanks for having me on the podcast. It's so excited for this.
Lovely. So, James, before we start with our first three questions, and then other three will follow, I would like, for the benefit of our audience, to describe ourselves. Now, I'll start. I have short hair with a teeny bit of white hair in the front. I'm wearing purple glasses with a purple frame, and I'm wearing kind of a jacket, pinkish, with green background, something like that. Okay, what about you, James?
So guess late 40s male, probably a lot more white hair than you have, I can see, wearing glasses as well, and wearing a kind of dark blue polo shirt.
Fantastic. So now that our audience has a slight idea of how we look like, I think we could start with the very first question, unless you want to add something to the short bio I introduced on what you have done and what you are doing. No, okay.
No, I think that's all. That's it. I just want to say how much of a great podcast and everything that you're doing. I think that's great for everyone to understand all the great work you're doing as well. So yeah, it's great to be here.
Lovely. Okay, James, let's start with question number one. Now, your career, from the little I said about your bio, has been marked by definitely significant involvement in major sporting events, because now you're really devoted a lot on sport issues, from what I understood from our conversations, particularly through roles, as I mentioned earlier on, with Coca-Cola and the Olympic Games. So how do you see the intersection between sports, sustainability? And when I talk about sustainability, I don't mean only environmental sustainability, but also social sustainability, governance, and economic sustainability. All of this is the package of sustainability. So how do you see the intersection between sports, sustainability from its different dimensions? You can pick up one, and inclusivity, shaping the future of major sporting events.
Well, I think it's a great question, and a very big question, if I'm honest. And I think not only with my involvement with Coca-Cola and major sporting events, I now work on the GB Aquatics Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Advisory Board, and also on the Laureus Sport for Good Awards. So for me, one of the reasons that I kind of wanted to change the direction of my career was because I believe that sport is at this tipping point. And And when it gets to that point, you feel as though we need more of us to get involved. So because that intersection, as you talked about, on sustainability, on all these different elements that's so important to society, that it's not always moving in the right direction. And I think we're getting a little bit lost on that. And we all know this, that the power of sport is huge. It's phenomenal. It teaches so many things. From the basics of health to values and all these learnings that we all grew up with, and the excitement of what we do when we watch sport as well. But we need to make sure that we're being relevant. And for me, it's really about how do we make sure that we're relevant for the next generation? What are we doing that's making this the right thing for us to do? The other one is about resilience. And if we see this and the impact that sport has and the changes it's happening on grassroots, on all these different places, especially when you talk about finances, we need to make this, resilient for the next generation so that money is going into the right places and supporting the right communities to accelerate in these kind of areas. And the final one is responsibility. Sport has a responsibility to deliver this. So for me, I don't think that there are going to be many sporting events that can continue unless they understand this cross section and the integration of these key areas that deliver a positive impact for society. So for me, I think we're at an interesting place, but I think we've got lots to do.
James, you said equity, which is a magic word. Can you explain it in a bit more? What you mean by that?
Well, for me, it's very much about providing people with the consistent opportunity to experience the same things, whatever that background or ability or culture that is. We have to try and level the playing field so that people have the same opportunity to engage, experience it, whatever their background, whatever their difference is. And how do we try and get that so everyone has the same equity within it?
Have you got an example or good practices to share, just to give an idea of what, this is the theory and I agree, but something practical so that people can grasp the idea behind it, the principle of equity?
Yeah, I mean, and actually, you've given a great demonstration at the beginning of this, is for us to describe ourselves so that people there that might have a visual disability have now got an idea of what we look like. So it's things like that. We sometimes forget that we need to be thinking outside of our own comfort zones and our own world to understand that. And having worked on a number of Olympics in different cities, you maybe don't understand, for someone who's got visual impairment, how difficult it is to walk on sidewalks in Rio de Janeiro. They're the most famous things in the world, but if you're in a wheelchair, they're really not much fun to wheelchair along. So how do we level that? How do we provide that so that people can do that? And they've got access to hotels and things like that. All my time working with the IPC and in the Paralympics, it was just understanding those things. And for me, it's a lot more about understanding those worlds outside of us and make it more inclusive.
Yeah, I think we also have to work on other kind of social cultural changes, improvements. If I think of equity in terms of salary to athletes, women and men, there is also something that we could be talking about, right? And what we can do for this to stop and to reach equity there too.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
I completely agree with that. I think it's such an important point within that, but also within the grassroots as well. So those younger generations, we now see significantly higher salaries, but are we providing the support for younger generations who suddenly get a lot of money and what to do with it? We've all heard the bad stories about people who got a lot of money too young, and it goes in the wrong places. So I think you're exactly right. The financial side of it needs to be addressed. It's good to see that there are some sports that are leading this in a way. I mean, tennis has been a standout one, but we've still got a long way to go with a lot of other sports, let's be honest.
Right. Okay. I like this conversation, and maybe we could have one in the future on the aspect of finance and the economy turning around. the sport, not only major events, but also other things such as building gymnasiums for children or else. That's a different kind of investment towards the well-being of the community, and you mentioned it earlier on. I have a second question for you. Now, as a leader in marketing and brand strategy, James, you have worked extensively in diverse cultural contexts, right? We said Tokyo, we said Rio, now we are in London and many other places of the world. So, how do you approach fostering social change? And if you wish, you can also add something about inclusivity through your marketing initiatives, particularly in regions with distinct social cultural landscapes. Because yes, I think that fostering inclusivity and initiatives that keep in mind the concept of sustainability, initiatives that can be sustained in the future. See, this is what I would be interested in to hear from you.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of the key topics at the moment is how do brands do this. But for me, it's how do you do it authentically? I think there's so many times that we see brands box ticking and trying to be more inclusive, but they do it in a non-authentic way, which I think does turn off the consumers or the customers in a way that they feel as though this doesn't relate to me. So it always, for me, starts with understanding. So, and I'll use the context of Tokyo. So when I was in Tokyo and we built the whole of the 2020 Olympic Games program, underneath it was embedded diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, anyone who knows Coca-Cola as a brand would know that Coke, whilst it does do a lot of inclusion and diversity, it's not something you would start with a campaign. So it's not the kind of, oh, great, let's go out and do a fun campaign that's all about this. So you have to make sure that it's embedded in everything you do, from your operations to your marketing to every element of what we do, because you need to invite the consumer in different ways and different consumers and customers in different ways. So we created Team GB, the first time we've ever done a portfolio campaign, because we knew that the Olympic Games wasn't just for Coca-Cola drinkers, it was for anyone within the portfolio. And by driving that message and continuing to drive that message of anyone's welcome allows that to do. It's a bit like for our recycling campaign, we then opened that up because the more people who can recycle, the better the solution. So again, you're inviting consumers in through that way. And then lastly, we did the placard bearer. So we worked very closely with the organizing committee to create the opportunity for Coke to choose the people who carried the country names. And they were made up of some of the most amazing, diverse people you'd come across. And it was fantastic because we were celebrating all their stories. But I want to come back to when you look at this within the culture. So Japan as a market is an amazing country in many ways, but it struggles in certain areas of inclusion and diversity. There are challenges and they try and overcome those things, but this is decades of culture that's ingrained. So you've got to slowly move that. But then with someone like us and the work we did with the IPC, the We the 15 campaign, the other sponsors, we managed to, over that period, drive awareness of diversity across the whole of the Japanese population by 15%. So that's quite a big thing when you think about it, that over 2 years from what we decided to do started to have an impact. The way that we involved ourselves with the We the 15, the way that we did all these different elements, and that can drive positive change within that culture, on top of still driving sales and driving marketing engagement, things like that. So for me, it's really much about how you've got to have that conversation right at the beginning, not try and force it in at the end. And that's about doing it for the right reasons. So that's where I think when you look at local cultures, you have to be careful because every culture is different. You've got to learn, you've got to listen, you've got to understand, and you can't just come in and change things. It's not possible. But you've got to include people in that conversation, include the right people, and get the right feedback from the local market before you can push it.
So you're talking about consistency, persistence, continuity, and this will help in time. And each culture has its own time to change the mindset and also the behavior in uh, in a way that we can obtain a positive social change through sports. Right? I
Exactly.
was there at the United Nations. You know that I was in charge globally of the mandate on sport for development and peace. And in the year 2020, wow, that has been tough because of COVID. And
Oh,
I was in contact constantly with the ambassador of Japan in order to see what we could do. And it has been very tough. So, chapeau to you who managed to go through that very difficult Olympic in Tokyo in 2020. Right.
yeah.
Actually, we postponed, I think, to believe of some time, 1 year almost,
Yeah.
because of COVID. And so, to start a project, stop it, and then start again, not easy at all. So again, chapeau. Um,
It takes a
I,
team. It always takes a
yeah.
team to do these things. So, and that was the best thing. We all came together at the right time.
Right. And then, having you so much passion for what you do, that's indeed also a fuel that keeps burning in a positive way until finally the engine can start. I have a third question. Now, your current role at Nobody's Studio, and I would like you to explain a tiny bit more what it is. But I do know that it involves guiding early stage ventures towards growth and innovation. And I love talking also about innovation because it brings me to sustainable futures, right? So, how do you ensure, James, that these ventures prioritize sustainability and, if you want, also inclusivity, but fairness in their teams and also their businesses, particularly when I think of industries like sport or tourism, where social sustainability and fairness are increasingly scrutinized, particularly also in the world of business. So, while creating a strong and mutually beneficial partnerships externally, of course, this is important. We also have to see what we can do in the realm of fairness, social sustainability, and the industry of sport.
Yeah, I think, well, so Nobody Studios was set up probably 2022 around then. And essentially, it's a venture studio. So what the studio is dedicated to do is to find, and this is probably the inclusive piece, is anyone can come to the studio with an idea, and it can be an idea written on a post-it note, and they can bring this as long as it has a positive impact or a purposeful impact on society and on people. And that's kind of the benchmark with everything that they come into. This has to be something and we're not exclusive in what this can be. It can be any kind of idea. What the studio then does is surround these people with great people who can help bring that idea to life, whether that's through tech, whether that's through strategy, whether through that's campaigns or fundraising, all these different elements. And so that we can help provide a platform for amazing people from wherever to come up with ideas and put them on the table and get the resources and the support they need to make that better. And I think it's interesting. I was out with one of the guys yesterday, and it is about how do we find these ways, because there are so many challenges in society. And you talk about innovation, and we are fortunate to be in a world now where innovation is moving at such a pace that we can find solutions to some of these more fundamental problems that we find in society. And we need to harness the innovation to drive that change, to support, people. And sometimes, lots have changed over the last 5 years. The world has been turned upside down and put back up again. So I think for me, it's how do we connect those two things, knowing that we're doing it for the right reasons. So what's the purpose behind it? So the team go through a number of ideas that come through. And then what we do is we aim to get those businesses up and running. We let them go. and then we start on the next round. So the plan is to invest in 100 startups in 5 years.
Wow. And but these are startups related to sports?
Not all,
Not
and in fact,
all.
they range across a number of things. So this is where I think there's this whole connectivity between impact and money and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. Some are, some aren't, but a lot of it all driven by purpose. It is very much a tech environment because we believe that's the right way.
Yes.
There are a number of other areas that I think within sport, and there's a lot of tech coming on in sport as well. So yeah, it's a cross section actually, to be honest, and that's one of the things that I love. I balance between both the impact and purpose within sport and within business. So
James, you said everyone can apply. It means or contact your group, and
yeah,
you it means from any wherever in the world, or okay,
sure.
so it's global in a
Yeah,
way.
so it's
Okay.
global. The ideas come from anywhere and everywhere. The people that work on the platform are around the world, from Singapore to the US to
Hmm.
London to, so it's all over the place. So that's the thing. Great ideas can come from anywhere.
So before we move to the second set of three questions, um, for those who have interest and are triggered or have great ideas and would like to contact you, how can they do it? How can they get in touch with you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, so that's the best way to do it. And yeah, happy to take people to connect on LinkedIn and take it from there.
Fantastic. Thank you. Now we go to the past, then the present, and then finally the future, since we're talking about conversations on sustainable futures. Um, so tell me, once upon a time, looking back at the past, how have your past actions and strategies reshaped our current landscape? And you can pick up whichever landscape you want to talk about.
I think probably one of the the elements that I would use is probably leadership. Um, I'm a great believer in leading from the front, and that's including everyone with you as you go and taking them on the journey. And if I think through all of my time over my 25 years, you don't get it right all the time, but what you've got to do is drive a culture that invites people in, that creates psychological safety, and that allows people to be the best of themselves. And I think that for me is when I look at what those kind of elements that I brought in, and I've managed and grown big teams in different countries in different cultures, and we've had to work very closely together, but that only comes from demonstration through actions and in being inclusive and being open and being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And for
Oh,
me,
yeah.
that has a knock-on effect. And you know I'm very fortunate that even in the last number of years that I've had people that worked with me years ago and how much they enjoyed it and what they've gone on to do. So seeing how they've been successful in using some of the ideas and how that's one of the things that I keep talking about is that's how you've got to build that. You can only do this by, you know, being authentic, being vulnerable, but also being inclusive. Ideas and people can come from any background and anywhere, and they should be included. And I used to always say this, that the idea can come from anywhere in a team, and I mean anywhere. So I think for me, when I look back and those strategies that I put in place, I hope that they have really kind of delivered to other people and inspired them to go on and do the same. And it's about how you pass it on. If you treat people right and you do this in the right way and you openly say when you might have got it wrong, and because I'm not saying I got it right every time because I didn't, but if you're open like that, then that people learn from that and then they take it on and they share it with other people. So that's what I think in my past, and that's been applied in so many things when I look at the successes of London or Rio or Tokyo, and even now that's been taken on to Paris, even though I'm not part of it. There's a lot of those elements that have lived and breathed in so many parts of the world now, which yeah.
Well, leadership indeed is very important, and we could devote another episode just about leadership. Many people have different styles of leadership, but the leader is simply someone who is leading, showing the path, showing the way, and then has to listen very carefully about all the others who decided to walk with him or her, and maybe even change direction sometimes, and lead the new direction. I agree with you. It's so important, and leadership, it means also to be able to lead our lives, to get to know who we are, how we responded to certain stimuli, and it's a beautiful topic. Now, from the past, and you said what you hope you have achieved by leading in certain ways, etc., to the present. So, in the year 2024, in your opinion, James, what is the most pressing and the challenging obstacle preventing us from, achieving widespread adoption of sustainable practices in the sport industry? And how can we overcome these obstacles?
Yeah, I think this is one of those ones where, strangely, the obstacles is probably more about is the unknown. So there are many people within the sports business that aren't clear about what they can do, how they can do it, the effects of it, and also the costs of it and things like this. And I speak to a lot of federations and things like that. And a lot of this comes down to money, whether we
Mm-hmm.
like it or not. And everyone thinks that being sustainable is expensive, but it's not. And that's about a fear and a lack of understanding and awareness. And I think that's the biggest obstacle we come across. So we need to simplify this in a way that people don't spend their lives looking at this, can quickly go, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's really easy. I only have to change one thing. The other one is the topic is so big. When we talk about, if we take your sustainability idea, whether you talk about money, inclusion, climate change, etc., it's a big elephant. It's a big elephant to eat for anyone in the sports industry to kind of look at that, and it's fear. It's going to be fearful to a lot of people. So for me, it's about how do people understand they can make 1% difference by making one little change that has a knock-on attitude, or a knock-on impact. And it is people changing that attitude that you're not trying to solve everything. You take a piece and you make a difference in that one. And you find other people who are trying to do the same thing and you add them together. And the collective starts to build and it builds momentum. So for me, I think, and the other one is a lot of it is there's a lot of talk about it. There's no clear kind of way of tracking or measuring and stuff like that. So find the people who can distill this down into an easy way, put it on the table and go, hey, if we just change this, it'll make a significant impact and we can track and measure and improve it. So for me, I think it's about understanding. The biggest obstacle is understanding. I think we need to simplify it because it's very complex. And sometimes when we talk about inclusion, it's complicated. We look at transgender and things like that. We know this is a hot topic and difficult. Federations are bringing out new policies all the time. So how do we start to grow that, make a little difference, bring people in, open the dialogue, and take away the fear? Because I think that's probably the biggest barrier that we have at the moment.
The beautiful thing is that you and I are here to simplify this complexity. And those who wish to contact either you or me or anyone else who is passionate and knowledgeable as you are or I am, we can help to simplify. And I agree with you. If you think of the Agenda 2030 approved by member states of the United Nations, and I was there in those years, and attending all the negotiations. The roadmap they created of 17 sustainable development goals, it's enough if you, and they have also many targets, 169 targets. If you just pick up one sustainable development goal, and in that one target, you are already achieving a huge, enormous result. And so, yes, indeed.
Uh,
And this,
it's
please.
It's a great point that you make. And I think the beauty of that and in those development goals is if you can't find one that doesn't fit, I'm lost, because they can come and speak to us, because there's such diversity in that in so many different ways that it's easy to pick at least one. In fact, I've worked on many projects where I think I've never picked less than 5. And I think that's the piece, is actually you don't realize until you have a look into it how potentially easy it is for you to make a little bit of impact. And a little bit of impact altogether makes bigger impact. So yeah, no, and congrats on that. I think that's an amazing piece of work. So I think all credit to you and everything that you did on that.
Well,
Bringing that to
governments, I was just advising.
You're good advisors, put it that way.
Right. James, and now we're from the past to the present, and now we move to the future. If you were 20 years old in 2071, oops, what kind of future would you hope to see unfold? And what specific contributions or actions you think you and your company or other activities you're carrying on should prioritize in the present to bring that vision to life in the sustainable future for generations to come, generations who are not born yet? Oops,
I think the thought
dream.
of
Here you can dream.
2071 is scary. But look, I think in my mind, especially when we look at sport, is I still want sport to be the most amazing kind of passion that people can get involved in, both as spectators, as fans, but also as participants and things like that. And even participating in watching sport, but participating in running and health and all that kind of stuff. So personally, I love to see sport being that driver for so many of the health elements within the world. So we have a healthier, happier society because of, at the heart of it is that. But one of the things, and I want to make sure that we do this, is it's done in a fun and engaging way, because there's a tendency for us to be very negative. If we talk about climate change, and there's a lot of negativity around whether it's sponsors and who's doing this and who's doing that. But it shouldn't be a bad stick that we hit everyone with. We have to find the ways for everyone to participate in this. So for me, when I look forward to it, I think we need to be essentially more conscious. So in 20 years' time, it's about conscious decision making that is impactful. And you talk about what do we need to do now? You need to be more conscious now of what's going to happen in 20 years. So you can start the process now. You don't have to have the solution now, but you've got to start the process towards where that can go. And yes, that might be about setting people in that direction, and it might change over time. But the reality is you've got to keep people on focus to that. And I think for me, we sometimes forget that we need to take the next generation along with us. So this isn't a generational problem. It's easy for us to blame up and down and within the generations, but actually no. The best solutions will be when the generations come together and we find those solutions together. So when I look at sport, I still want sport to be the big thing that it is. I want it to be more sustainable in every element, whether that's financing, money going to the right people for the right reasons, and people can consume and enjoy and still have it as a passion and an entertainment. But also from a health point of view, I want it to be the driver for a healthier, happier society as we go, and more inclusive. And I think that's it might be a little bit hopeful for 20 years, but hey, if we don't try, if you don't shoot for the stars, you're not going to get the moon. So I think that's kind of where I come, is how do we get more conscious about those decisions now? Because the decisions we make as people now will affect people in years to come that we don't realize, and that's not fair.
Right. Yeah. So we are trying to imagine now how the future is going to look like in 50 years from now. And I know that you're also an expert in, and you excel in digital integration. So I don't really want to talk about it. Well, we can talk about it, but definitely artificial intelligence and robotics and STEM and STEAM. I add also the art,
Yeah.
might have a huge impact on the way we perceive and we play sports in 50 years from now.
Yeah, hugely. And I'm a big advocate of AI. And again, I think there's a lot of people who say it as a negative, but actually if we see what it can pick up and allow us to do, essentially a lot of the jobs that no one likes doing, so it can do it faster and quicker for us. So we can stay, as you say, use the A on the creative side, on the things that we can do as humans that can generate new ideas, look at things in different ways. And that allows us to have more capacity, to be more successful, and to find better solutions. So for me, I'm a great believer in it. Work on a number of businesses at the moment within that kind of world as how can we impact that? How can we make a change? And, let's not forget the AI has been around for a very long time. So it's been around since the 1960s. So it's only now that we all see it. But no, I'm excited for the future. I really am for sport, and there's great momentum and there's great people out there driving this kind of piece of the integration of sport, of sustainability, of innovation, and driving this for a positive change. So I'm excited that there are people. I see the younger generation excited too, but they're not going to stick with the same old thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we're going to see the difference, is challenging the status quo to make it better.
I love it. Be disruptive.
That's the way. That's what
Yeah.
it is.
James, I liked this conversation, which is almost at the end. Unfortunately, I would have loved to stay a teeny bit longer with you, but I do hope in the future we will have opportunities to update our audience and listeners on new ventures of yours. So, in order to conclude this wonderful conversation and to wrap it up, I give you the choice. I'm going to share with you two questions, and you can pick up one of the two. The first one is, what would you ask yourself? And what would be your answer to your own question? Or the second one is, what is your next activity on your agenda once we bid adieu for today? Which one do you prefer?
I think I'm going to go to the bid adieu question. So, what am I going to be doing? Because
Yes.
I'm very lucky that I get to work in quite a diverse kind of way. And one of them is I chair a dementia charity because it's important. But for me, is the integration of sport into helping dementia in an aging population. And I'm off to go and see some people tomorrow to try and really start to build that in and integrate how we can help the older generation through those kind of challenges, but through the power of sport. So I'm kind of excited by that. Again, we're going to be bringing innovation and tech to that as well. So again, it's a whole new world for me. I'm excited by it. But again, it just shows the power of sport. It's always around, and it can play such a role in your life. You don't sometimes realize it.
Well, thank you for your activities. Thanks for taking care also of older generations. Some can be very healthy, others might need some different kind of support. Indeed, Europe, we know, is getting very old as other continents, while Africa is extremely young as it is India. So we have to think about intergenerations, how they can benefit of sports in all their different facets. And this will also have a very good impact in promoting well-being of people, but also our planet, right? So
Yeah,
I thank you
exactly.
so much, James. Anything else you would like to say to our listeners before we say bye?
No, just to say thank you very much for having me on here. I love the work you're doing. Always happy to catch up with you at any point. And as we said, if listeners want help or support, they're free to reach out. Find me on LinkedIn. But thank you again.
So, James Williams, thank you so much. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
As I wrap up this episode, my heartfelt gratitude to today's guest and to all of you. Join me for the next episode as we delve deeper with special guests, uncovering thought-provoking insights and actionable steps, paving the way for a brighter, inclusive, sustainable tomorrow. Thanks also to Damian Morton, music, and Maria Cortez Galliano, social media. Don't miss out next episode on shaping the future we aspire to. Ciao, ciao!